The only thing we did when we elected Trump was we changed lanes. We're still on the same highway. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you ultimately threaten people long enough, they'll abandon you. And that's happening. We now have CIPS, which is the alternative to the SWIFT system. We're watching countries do business with each other in their own currencies, whether it's Japan and China or Saudi Arabia and China or Iran and China. It doesn't matter. They're doing business in their own currencies. In other words, people are getting away from the dollar. We are being isolated. The original carrier of the plague. Put us in a room. And then you have President Trump, who decides, I'm going to bomb these sites in Iran, and joins the war as a co-belligerent. You have our allies in Tokyo and Seoul watching this and saying, this man's lost his mind. There's no reason for this. What are we doing this for? And this unconditional obedience to whatever comes out of Israel. All of this is doing enormous damage to the American people in the United States. And I think it's hurting Europe because we're dragging them down with us. At some point, this is going to change because I predict the governments in Europe will change. But remember that America is also the microwave nation. You know this, Dan. Well, when's this going to happen? Well, next week. And I will look at people and I say, well, it's developing. These things are coming together, but it's not going to happen overnight. BRICS did not happen overnight. It began over time, but we've accelerated the process. They've now built institutions much more rapidly than we thought possible. The point is that Americans say if you do something on day one, then on day two it should happen. It's not that way. The world does not operate like a microwave, but we're headed in very dangerous and bad directions unnecessarily. Because remember something else, we're harming people and nations who are our creditors. Think about that. Why would you take action against Japan in particular, who's our largest creditor outside of the United States? What is the purpose of that? What if these people decide, and I think they're getting close to it, to simply offload our treasuries in a giant fire sale? Well, they're not going to be the Lone Rangers when that happens. Countries just say, we've had it. We're not dealing with these people anymore. We depend on foreign investment. That's how our system works. People show up, they buy our bonds, we take the money. The money helps us sustain ourselves, our economy. And this is a cycle that has been going on for decades. When the foreign investment stops, what do? Well, we've been buying our own bonds. That's called toxic debt that sits on your desk at the Fed, but it has no value. You're buying up your own stuff to conceal the disaster that's underway. That's why you've got to look at all of these factors. But anyone who's a competent economist, and there are lots of them that people can go listen to, they're warning us that this is not going to end well. And it will come to a climax at some point. That's why we thought when we voted for President Trump, he would say, number one, I have to shed these overseas commitments, got to end these conflicts. I got to bring most of the forces home because I have to cut spending. I have to show our creditors that we're serious about reducing spending. I mean, that's effectively what he said. And what have we got now? We've got more of the same. So people are now saying, well, write them off. These people are crazy. They've lost their minds. They're going to go over the cliff. We are going to go over the cliff.
It's yes, I thought the way you put that a while ago was really eye-opening and so accurate. With the current administration, we didn't change routes; we just changed lanes on the same route, and I think we're seeing that manifest out. That's the whole Biden-like thing with the Ukraine war. That's just another manifestation of it. But let me ask you something. I know that over the years you said several times that we don't need to be worried about China as an aggressive power that's going to invade us because they just want to do business. And do you see anything changing? And actually, a better way to put that, if you were put in charge right now and if Trump magically would just listen to you, what would you do instead of sending NATO out to get ready to fight China and Russia? What would be a better course of action?
Well, remember, we are confronting Russia on Russia's doorstep. And from the very beginning, I and a few other people said that's strategically stupid. Why would the Russians and the Chinese pour into Mexico, raise Mexican forces and armies, put missile installations and threaten us from Mexico, because we could destroy them in Mexico. Mexico's on our doorstep. Our logistical problems are minimal. So when you talk about fighting China or fighting Russia, we're talking about going thousands of miles away from the United States. Heavy dependence on long lines of communication and logistics, moving forces, moving supplies, munitions, and everything else. It's unrealistic nonsense. We can't win a war over Taiwan. First of all, we don't need to. And we should get out of that business entirely. That's back to the idea of, the Chinese are going to defend us or defend Cuba against us. Why? Why would they bother? It's a lot of nonsense. So the bottom line is we got to get out of all of these things. We have to focus on our country, because everything that's really critical to our future will be decided here, not over there. And Americans, I think, instinctively understand that, but Washington doesn't. Washington thinks everything here is fine because most of the people in Washington live in a bubble. They don't live in the real world. They're not pressed hard. And unfortunately, the elites, the people who are billionaires or worth hundreds of millions of dollars, they're not being pressed by economic matters and financial concerns here in the United States, let alone criminality and illegal aliens. It's not a problem for them. It is a problem for the overwhelming majority of Americans who care about their country and are trying to make a life for themselves and their children. But the bottom line is that China, you want to deal with China. China right now, Chinese ownership of agricultural land in the United States. You know how much agricultural land the Chinese actually own? Less than 1% of our agricultural land. Now, if you don't like that, you know what you do? You pass a bill. And the bill says no foreign entity can own agricultural property in the United States. They can't own minerals. They can't own mines. Just pass the bill. And then they have to divest themselves. It's very simple. Secondly, if you don't like the fact, a lot of people don't, and I agree with them, that we have massive numbers of Chinese in our laboratories, at universities, well, then you need to have an executive order that says all the Chinese are going to leave and send them home. And at the same time, get control of your borders. Get control of the harbors, of the airports. We have no control over any of that. People pour in and out all the time. Now, somebody will say, well, we don't want to throw all the Chinese out. Well, that's fine. Then we can be discriminating. But my point is, there are ways to deal with this. The Vietnamese a few years ago threw all the Chinese out of Vietnam. Are the Chinese and the Vietnamese doing business? Yes.
That's a good point.
The Chinese have thrown Japanese out of China. Are the Chinese and the Japanese doing business? Yes. Listen, this is the real world. You make decisions on the basis of your national interest. That's what you do. But the Japanese are not going to attack China. Chinese don't want to attack Japan. The Chinese certainly don't want to go back to Vietnam. They did that in 1979. That was a very unsatisfactory experience. Listen, we have to come back to reality and stop looking at everything as a potential club with which to hit people over the head. And that's the way we look at the financial system, which we built after the war, which is crumbling, frankly. It's falling apart now. We don't want to live. We say we understand this. President Trump says he understands it and is prepared for it. But in reality, we don't want to live in a world where we don't have hegemony over everything. If we did, we'd change overnight, dramatically scale back our investment in the defense budget and bring our forces home. But we don't really believe that. It's the same problem that Israel has right now. Israel refuses to live in a region that it does not dominate. So what's that mean? That means that everybody has to be subjugated to Israel. How does Israel do that? With us. That's our job, to subjugate everybody to Israel. That's ridiculous. And that's not a good future for Israel. If Israel wants to exist in that region, it has to come to a different arrangement. Just as if we want to exist in the world, we have to come to terms with a different arrangement. We cannot always dominate.
And you know what you mentioned a minute ago about a lot in Europe, people wise anyway, are starting to get uncomfortable with the way the elites are doing it with the France, Germany, UK, etc. They have been dominating stuff, but then this is kind of maybe like a canary in the coal mine with Robert Fico talking about how he's getting damn tired of a lot of this because I don't know if it's passed since I haven't seen since we came on the air, but Europe was just about to pass its 18th round of sanctions against Russia, but Slovakia, among others, are saying, hey, this is bad for us. I don't want to get into this. Here's how he put it.
We will never vote for this madness of the Commission. The phone calls of the hardliners are coming to an end. There is a written proposal of the Commission's guarantees on the table, which the Commission offers us for voting on the 18th sanction package. I have already said that this dispute cannot be won 100-0, but we cannot even lose it 100-0. Those who want to live with the wolves must live with them. This is unfortunately the cruel reality of the current union. Therefore, we must fight to the last moment for an acceptable compromise. Right now, I am sending a proposal of the Commission's guarantees to all relevant political parties, and I expect a statement from them. I believe that the answers of the presidents of the opposing parties will not harm Slovakia at all costs. It is necessary to realize that the suspension of the flow of Russian gas will take place after 1.1/2028, i.e. after the parliamentary elections, and it may be the current opposition, which will gain power and which will have to wipe the tears of the abandoned workers or run away from their anger.
That last phrase is what really got me, because or run away from their anger. He seems to be warning that if we keep going down this path here, which is the elites running everything at the pointing at confrontation with Russia, that at some point even the local populations may rise up. How do you see it?
Eventually, yes, but it's back to what we discussed earlier. They have to be touched by the destruction. In other words, their lives have to be severely harmed in a way that's unambiguous. Until that happens, most of the Europeans will sort of march like sheep in the direction their leaders tell them to go, provided it doesn't hurt them. As soon as there's some real pain, all of that will change. I don't think that's really surprising. It's in the nature of most modern societies that they behave that way. Let me finish with something that's very important for most Americans and people in the West to understand. In 1914, Russia's #1 trading partner in the world was Germany. And Germany's #1 trading partner in the world was Russia. In 1941, Germany's #1 trading partner was the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union's #1 trading partner was Germany. Now, my point is this. It's self-defeating for the people that live in Europe to behave as they are behaving because of what we are telling them to do. That's the real crux of the matter. And it goes back to the simple truth that we don't live in Europe. We're Americans. We live in the Western Hemisphere. We live in North America. And the Europeans have got to come to terms with that. They've never really understood that. De Gaulle was the exception. And he said that from the very beginning. And he pointed out that Britain was not really part of Europe. It was an island. And again, British interests on that island were never connected absolutely with what happened on the continent. And he knew that. So there has to be a re-examination of all the things that are going on. But right now, the elites that are in power will not do that. These are the Sorosistas, the products of the globalist movement. They are the ones responsible for the destruction that has already been wrought across Europe. They will, I suspect, be held accountable. I don't know what it'll look like. It could look like the Place de la Vendée, the French Revolution in 1789 before we're through. There will be so many people so angry about the misfortune visited on them. I think we're going to face something similar here at some point when people finally say that's enough, no more. And the disappointment here is particularly acute because so many people express such faith in President Trump's readiness to chart a fundamentally new course. That's all gone under.
Well, listen, I appreciate you bring, at least explaining what's going on. The fact that we changed lanes, not changed paths, and I appreciate more than anything else your path that it doesn't have to go down this way. There hasn't been this uprising yet. We haven't paid this price yet with the pain having been inflicted upon us, and there's still possibility, as late as it is in the hour, to shift course. And then you've laid out what is a good course, something that could be beneficial for everybody, lower the tensions anywhere else, raise the possibility of economic prosperity, and then set a course that can be sustained for a long time. That is like the recipe for something great. We just have to hope that we can get there, even if it's by stumbling and mistakes. But that's certainly a better course than where we're heading right now. And we really appreciate you highlighting that today.
Okay, Dan. Good to talk with you and Gary.
Thank you very much. And the same with us as well. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.